on 12, VTR 30-30, length 2825, start.
Welcome to Newsmakers, a public affairs presentation of WWBT 12, with your host, Charles Fishburne.
Hello. Welcome to Newsmakers. We have Larry Mather. Larry is the director of zoology at King's Dominion Lion Country Safari. This fellow back here is a cockatoo. His name is Suki. No, that's a lion cub. This is Tiki, right, Larry? I'm saying
Yes,
this right.
that's Tiki.
We're going to talk some today about what they're doing up at Lion Country. Is that good? Up at Lion Country Safari in the wintertime. A lot of these animals are used to warm weather. And, of course, it's been very cold. They found some surprising things about taking care of animals in the warm weather, some of which might apply to us. Why don't we talk a little bit about the animals that we have on the set here, Larry, and then we can let them go off the set, and maybe this bird will stop chewing on my hair. Larry, the lion cub. Now, how old is it? A he or she?
This is a he. This is Suki, who we've met once before. He's the one that was born white and has since changed in the last few months to an almost regular tawny color.
Well, now, how old is the lion cub?
Just about 4 months right now.
How long will it be that you can do this with the cub?
Depending on the animal, this one will probably be handleable for another 6 months. But size then becomes a factor as well as disposition.
Yeah.
It's a pretty nice cub, as you can see. Has a good disposition. These cats grow a very long coat. This animal has been kept indoors for the winter, and some of our other cubs that we can't handle because they're more wild and were raised out with the pride have much longer coats, and kind of indicates how they're able to adapt out in the winter.
What would happen if you just put him down on the floor? Would that make Suki happier? Now we had a mouflon in here earlier, which is, what is that? Looks like a little lamb, actually.
Yeah, that was the first animal that we've had born this winter, and of course, spring is a normal calving period, and I think we're very fortunate to be able to pull this animal out of the ice and raise it in the nursery, and we thought we'd bring it down here and maybe have it run through in a little bit. It's a mouflon. It's a European goat-like animal. When it's grown, it has very large, massive horns.
Right. Now this animal, this bird on my shoulder, this is a cockatoo, right?
That's a cockatoo.
Now why is it eating my hair?
That's behavioral adaptation. They do preen each other. I believe that's right. And it's a little nervous, and since you're a stranger, it's saying, I want to be friends, and it's a way of making friends with you.
Is that what you're doing up there? Where do these things come from? Now, is this animal adapt to cold weather also fairly easily?
No, they're a very warm weather bird, and we do have to keep heat on them all winter. They come from New Zealand, Solomon Island area. There's a lot of cockatoos that range throughout Australia in the warmer climates of the world.
Okay, here comes the mouflon. I tell you, Joy, if you would like to take Suki off, and maybe we can get, what's his name? Henry, the mouflon, on. Henry is running around the studio here. I don't know if you can see Henry, but we will have Henry here in a moment. Henry and Suki don't get along too well. Here we go.
Actually,
behind the camera.
We were hoping to have the lion and the.
Okay, here we go. We're going to get a camera on Henry in a minute here. There he is. Now, how old is Henry?
Henry's just a couple of weeks old. He's between 2 and 3 weeks. He was born in a very cold snap we had, and normally animals that are born at this time, especially some of the warmer weather animals, do not do well, of course, and we grab them as quickly as possible and hand raise it in the nursery, and this one's done very well, still in a bottle. And when it gets big, it'll be one of those very, much of like a mountain goat from this country, very large, massive horns, very beautiful.
Seems to be a friendly little animal.
Yes, it is. At this age, most of them become imprinted to the human people that take care of them, and the people, and they do become very much human-like, and hopefully, once they get larger, we'll reintroduce it to the herd structure, and it will then become more...
I guess they're all a little bit nervous being out here with different people and cameras and all.
Yeah, I went in a few minutes ago and woke them up to bring them down to the show, and I think that was quite a surprise.
I'll tell you what, we're going to talk some more about the animals, about what you're doing in the winter to keep them happy and warm, and about some of the things that you've learned about animals at King's Dominion when we return on Newsmakers. We're talking with Larry Mather and friends from King's Dominion, and I had gone up earlier this week, Larry. I was very much interested in some of the things you had to say about how you take care of animals in the winter. A lot of these animals are from like South Africa and places that it doesn't get the kind of temperatures we have here, and we've learned some things about exactly how to care for animals in the wintertime. Now, King's Dominion has been there, what, a couple, 3 years, and I know I've been up there several times on different stories, and you've had interesting things going on, like you have actually had orthodontists come up, dental people to take care of lions with toothaches, which seems improbable, but it happens. And in fact, I remember one of the lions there, if it had been in the wilds, would have actually died from an abscessed tooth, but here it's taken care of. I remember there was a very interesting experiment going on maybe a year and a half ago about release time capsule contraceptive devices for the animals, that you had problems with too many animals in the preserve. And this is something that might apply to humans too. What I would like to know is, why do you spend all this time and money and effort and care for the animals? It must be extremely expensive. And it almost seems like you're doing far more than necessary to keep an animal preserved for people to come and see.
Yeah, that's a very good question, Charles. There's really a lot of reasons for it, and I guess one of the basic ones is there isn't a heck of a lot of knowledge, really, about some of the exotic species today. And every time that we do one of these experiments, we're sort of contributing a little bit, and we know that down the road it's going to help some of the other zoos, and as well as turn around and be built upon and come back and help us. I think that's one of the main benefits that we receive, even though we don't get a remuneration or money back for it right now. For instance, some of the studies that you mentioned, one of the interesting things was that lions have been in captivity since the Roman times. We all know about them in the gladiators and things. Yet no one had ever done a complete blood normal study on the lions. And many things like this just were not known, which handicapped veterinarians working with them to a very large extent. So by participating in this type of program, we, as I said, sort of added the knowledge, a little bit more knowledge to the pot. And it covers all areas, including, we were talking about winterization. It goes right into winterization, too.
We'll talk some more about that in a moment. We have on tape a story that I did some while back, and that was basically about the birth control devices. I talked about hippopotamuses. Is that the plural, or is it hippopotami?
Hippopotamus.
Whichever. We did this story on birth control devices for them and the other animals, and I'd like you to look at that now.
Well, frankly, it seems improbable to me, but they say love is in the eye of the beholder. And there's been entirely too much beholding going on up here among the hippos at King's Dominion. Same problem with the rhinos and the lions and all the others. King's Dominion, like most preserves, keeps a very much controlled environment for the animals. So they called in a team of experts, Dr. Clinton Gray from the Washington National Zoo and Dr. Ulysses Seal, an endocrinologist from the University of Minnesota. They say birth control pills and IUDs are out because they're expensive and can produce hazardous side effects. What they have developed is a contraceptive hormone time-release capsule, which is implanted in the body and slowly releases progestin into the bloodstream. They say the results are exciting. The implant has been 100% effective, lasts 3.5 years, is reversible, and has no side effects.
We're very excited about it. We've got experience now on nearly 100 animals, and over 2 years of experience, there have been no failures, and we've had no recognized side effects or ill effects from it, so we're very pleased.
While these devices are being used for animals like rhinoceroses now, they're probably 3 to 5 years away to be tested and marketed for humans. Meanwhile, for underdeveloped nations of the world and for us, the very existence of such a device has profound implications. Charles Fishburne reporting for NBC News.
Now that we did some time ago, Larry, I guess last year, maybe 2 years ago, and I know they have used this same thing at other places around the country.
this same type of birth control?
Yeah.
Yes, it's been picked up, and a lot of zoos are now using it on cats, and also Yulee has taken the experiments on into other animals, deer, and we're thinking about also doing possibly eland here, maybe in the spring.
So this is one case where it has really been very successful with your animals, and there is a good possibility that that it may be used on humans as well.
Well, this type of thing, a lot of things like this are, of course, transferable across human to animal barriers, and some of the research, original research, is done with humans. You can take it and bring it into the animal world, and vice versa. So I'm really not sure here which end is going which way, but we're certainly doing a lot of things that will have implications in many, many areas, and we're really proud to be making that investment.
I have really enjoyed coming up and doing stories with you from time to time over the years, and this particular story, I remember we had to actually get out and chase the rhinoceroses around, which is, they're huge animals, and they're very timid, as I recall, and we were out there trying to get close enough to get a shot of them. This week when I came up to do a story on the wildebeest, I want you to see some film here. Dan, this is the first film, and this is uncut. This is what you never see on news programs, and I want you to see the difficulties that I have encountered in trying to do a story with the animals. Way to do a news story. The question is, how do you warm a wildebeest? And these little animals are eating my cord. Hey, go away from there. Beat it. Come on. Take off, animals. I know you're hungry. Hello. Go away. Yes, I know. No, that's an exposure meter. Hey, bug off. I don't know if I'm in the picture or not. The question is, how do you warm a wildebeest? It's a serious question, unless, of course, you happen to be another wildebeest. All right, I want to show you a little bit of some of the trials and tribulations we go through in trying to put a story together. These, what were those little animals that were kind of gnawing?
Those were the adults of
this little thing that's running around the studio.
We've got running around the studio, yeah, Mouflon.
Well, they stay very friendly. I wish you could see this thing. He's just sort of jumping around the periphery here. Come on, let's do it one time. Well, I'm sure Henry will come back from time to time and visit us. But this really was a serious story, and what we discovered this week was that you can really go overboard in trying to make these animals comfortable in the wintertime. And if Dan can cue up the second part of that thing, I'll show you exactly how this story eventually turned out. Now, what it is, we have discovered, it's okay, you have discovered that, as I said, you can make animals too comfortable in the wintertime, and maybe there are some things that we as human beings can learn from this. So this is a story that we put together from part of this. Dan? The question is, how do you warm a wildebeest? It's a serious problem, unless, of course, you happen to be another wildebeest.
These animals would be a lot happier in southern Africa instead of here in central Virginia, where the temperature the night before was 10 degrees. At this preserve near Richmond, the animals are kept comfortable in lean-tos and portable shelters, some with propane heaters. Some animals are kept in barns. But zoologist Larry Mather has discovered he can make the animals too comfortable. One winter, he kept a flock of flamingos indoors in a warm room. 1/3 of them died. But this year, they're kept outside in a partially heated lean-to and even allowed to run outside on cold days.
Yes, we've learned quite a bit. I think one of the things that we're working with right now is temperature. We're trying to keep the temperature at a lower reading than what we have in the past. We found we had problems with too much heat. The animals do adapt quite readily to the conditions if they're given a chance, and actually turn out to be a little healthier.
Larry thinks perhaps we can learn something from the animals, that perhaps we all spend too much time in overheated homes and offices, and that by lowering the temperatures a few degrees. We might feel better for it. Charles Fishburne, WWBT News. Well, that'll be on our news show, and you may have seen it already. I think it's important that we can learn things like that. A couple of things I wanted to ask you, and one of them is, all of us have pets, I guess. But in your experience with animals, why have you devoted your life to it? Do they have feelings? And like when you call Henry, will Henry ever respond to that name? Does Henry have feelings? And
That's a real neat question. I think all of us that do work with animals think about that a lot. You know, there's a tremendous amount of communication, nonverbal communication, between each person that has a very close relationship with these animals on a daily basis. And I think that's one of the things that really keep us interested and motivated in taking care of them. We have many instances where an animal actually talks to you, and I say nonverbal. For instance, maybe we have someone going in to feed a very large horned eland in a pen, and I think the people that have cattle or worked horses can kind of get the same feeling that I'm talking about. And by making one threat gesture, such as increasing the size of his eyes and looking at you, he's saying to you, hey, you're coming too close, you're in my space. And that's a sort of a communication. You also know when they respond, such as a young animal we have here, that when you take care of them and they as they grow up, they know you and you know them on a personal basis. And then there are things like the rangers knowing every cat. We have 60 or 70 lions out there, knowing each one as an individual.
I noticed that. Every cat has a name, and there are a lot of them out there, and they all look the same to me. Well, do the cats know the rangers on a first-name basis is what I want to know.
Just about on a first-name basis. A stranger can go into an area, and they will know immediately that it's not the usual person coming in to feed them or take care of them. And there will be some communication going on there, some excitement, and behaviors will change. And of course, that person will not know that communication is being sent to him until he's worked it for a while, and then he'll realize what's happening. But it certainly is there.
Well, now, of course, these animals are not anywhere close to being in their native habitat. I mean, they're basically, as we said earlier, in central Virginia, in a place that they probably would be normally uncomfortable. How do they respond to a different kind of environment? I know you do make some attempt to make them at home.
Right. Our preserve is set up so that it's a very large free-ranging area for most of the animals, and they're able to have their behaviors similar to what they would in the wild, the group behaviors, particularly the herd animals. They have a large space with which to roam, and this, I think, is the main factor. And then we do a number of other things, of course, trying to keep the feed proper, the proper nutritional balance, and we take care of them, all the medical needs. And then the sheltering, which we have to do some modification here because the environment is somewhat different. And we do have them in confined space. They can't make migrations, such as the wildebeest will. Some of the pinion birds can't migrate to the various warmer climates. So we're really in an artificial basis here, and we're actually the life, the death, we're the daily everything to these animals. And I think this is what makes us realize the importance of our job. And then we take it's very important to us the things that we do to make their life better under these circumstances, which is something we've talked about.
Yes, I've always been struck at what pains you go to make them happy and comfortable and medically well. How about the people that come to Lion Country, to Safari, to see these? What is the most popular animal, or who are the most popular animals that they talk about, comment on?
Well, again, I think animals that people can communicate with without being knowledgeable about the animals seem to be the most popular. Either that or size or activity. And when I mean communicate, for instance, when we were drive-through, the cars always used to stop at the ostrich.
Right, the ostriches will come over and look you right in the eye.
And peck at the window, and there seems to be some sort of a look you in the eye, and there's some sort of a communication that goes on there. And I think these types of things are really extremely important to everybody. Then there, of course, the size, like the large giraffe and the elephants are about the next thing. And then anything that's active is very important. The public likes activity. So I think there's a form of communication that you get from long time working with the animals and a form of communication that you can get just by going through once and observing them, and many people really love this type of...
This is amazing. Why is he doing that? Now, what do you call that?
Well, we call it springing, or there's many terms. It indicates, I think, well-being. We feel that the animals are well-fed, he's healthy. It's also a growing thing. He's learning his stability. Many of these type of animals live in high, rocky, dangerous footing type terrain. And what young animals do during their growth period often is what they will have to do on a daily basis when they're full grown, such as lions attacking a prey.
This is
they
so
play
strange.
with each other.
Where is he?
He's gnawing on your chair, I think.
Now, I can't pat him. I mean, they don't respond like a cat would. I mean, it doesn't really matter to Henry what I'm doing.
No, theirs is a very different type of communication. Very different.
Well, we'll come back and talk some more on some things that you can expect to see at King's Dominion this spring, if you would like to go out there, when we return on Newsmakers. We're talking with Larry and the animals on, sounds like a rock group, doesn't it, on Newsmakers today. Larry, what kind of things can we expect to see at Lion Country Safari this spring?
Well, hopefully, we'll have a lot of newborn animals out there. Of course, spring's our big calving period, and over the last 3 years, we've really been building up stock we're quite proud of, breeding groups, some very rare, fairly rare animals. It's always nice to come out and see the young animals in spring. It's an indication that the bad weather's gone, and I think that's probably the big thing we're going to do. We don't have anything new in terms of animals this year.
Right. Let me ask you something now in a general sense. I know you, being very closely connected with animals, probably have thought about it, but I watch television commercials for cat food, and I'm really amazed at the enormous amount of money that we spend taking care of animals, of pets. And maybe this isn't even a fair question, but how can we as human beings afford to spend so much time and energy and money on animals when they're people, they're humans, that don't have enough to eat or don't have adequate shelter? Is there something wrong with this? How do you explain this to yourself?
No, I think that, you know, the as we mentioned before, there's a form of communication, and I think human beings in all stratas of society relate well with animals, and you, of course, you'd have to separate it down to exotics and then to domestics, and it's a whole different set of questions for each one, and to try to justify it. We justify what we're doing, of course, because many of the animals are rare, endangered, and they face the possibility of not existing in the future on this planet. And sometimes just knowing, although you never get to go to Africa, but just knowing there's a spot where there'll always be wild, large African elephants roaming is some sort of mental stimulation, I think, that we all need. It's a feeling, a very deep feeling. And I think that you can take that across and go back to the domestic animals. Many of us just cannot go to these places, do not have the luxury to work with exotic animals. And a domestic animal that fills that niche, and of course then you can take it on into the companionship of the many other various areas. But it's a very deep philosophical question, but I think the animals fill a very important role in all societies.
Well, let me ask you another one. We talked earlier about some of the things you had learned in trying to help the animals adapt to cold weather and how we as human beings could profit from this experience. What else have you personally learned from animals that has helped you in your relationship with other human beings?
I think the main thing is the directness, the honesty. Animals seem to always deal with you in an honest way. If you cross them and they respond, it's in an honest way. They're going to tell you, hey, you did wrong. And I think sometimes in society we tend to back down from honest confrontations with our fellow human beings. And I think working with animals, that very direct honesty is the paramount thing that I've learned over the years. And of course, there are many other subtle things that really hard to find words for, but
now we may have problems back here because the lion is back, and the lion and the mouflon are not used to each other. You're going to see it live in color, ladies and gentlemen. Well, now, I guess these two animals would never be what you would call friends at any stage of their development, would they?
Not these two. They were not kept together, but you know, surprisingly, young animals strange animals can adapt and grow up together and be very close friends if they're brought up at a very young age. We've had animals like this, and the lion cubs brought up that played with each other, but then at a certain age they quickly separate to their own various ways.
Are there certain animals that just can never be totally domesticated? I've heard that. I guess maybe a lion might be an example.
Well, they've proven that most animals can be domesticated, but it's depending on how young you get the animal and how you start them out. Very few animals can be captured or taken when they're adult and domesticated anyway.
Well, Larry, I really appreciate you coming by and bringing all your animals. It's a fascinating thing that we have in Virginia, and I appreciate you coming to join us on Newsmakers, and thank you.
Join us again next week for Newsmakers, a presentation of WWBT 12.